In this world, even good has to clench his fists. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Helicopter, the podcast that's the product of a secret government weapons program. You know what the trouble with superhero movies is? They're all a bit too American. Whether it's Batman, Spider-Man or Superman, Catwoman, Wonder Woman or Supergirl, they all seem to find themselves cloaked in the stars and stripes and defending truth, justice and the American way. Little wonder then that from time to time, countries around the world tire of this cultural Pax Americana and decide to put their own national spin on the superhero genre. So, on this show, we're looking at one of those efforts and what might best be described as a Russian attempt at the Avengers or a Soviet-styled X-Men. It's 2017's Guardians. To help me review the film, I'm joined by a man who, he may make a good borscht, but I wouldn't call it a superpower. It's Nikolai Rihak. Welcome back to the show, Tavarish.
Thank you for having me back on, man. I appreciate it.
Now, Nick, I was looking at my stats on Letterboxd ahead of this recording, and I have logged 5,466 films on Letterboxd. How many of them do you think are Russian?
I'm going to say over 5, under 11.
Ooh, I think you've played this game before, Nick. Well, the answer, my friend, is 19, and I was kind of shocked by that because I don't know what that is as a percentage. I probably could have worked it out before but that's a tiny percentage, and I was kind of shocked that even accidentally I wouldn't have watched a larger number. I just find it something, rather incredible that I've seen so few Russian movies.
Well, here's the thing. Are they separating Russian from Soviet? Because some films are technically considered Soviet films, but in modern parlance, we just say Russian films. But maybe there's a technicality in Letterboxd that's making it seem one way or the other.
Well, Soviet doesn't exist as a category in Letterboxd, so I'm assuming that Soviet era films get just bundled under the Russia tag. But I haven't done the statistical deep dive into that. But I think it's rather bizarre because that I have seen so few, because it's not as if Russia doesn't have great directors, Sergei Einstein, Tarkovsky, Bondarchuk. They've got some, they've got some big names out there, and I'm just somewhat amazed that, I like to think of myself as somebody with a well-rounded cinematic education who makes a point of trying to sample different films. But somewhat curiously, I seem to be very underdeveloped in my Russian movie watching, and I don't know if you've counted them up yourself, but where do you stand on what's your sort of level of familiarity with movies from that country?
Well, it is certainly less than yours. I'd have to say Russia is a huge blind spot for me. I weirdly find myself kind of close to them, but more so Eastern European film, Polish films, Hungarian films, Czech films, things like that. And then on the other side of them, Japanese, South Korean, those are kind of the wheelhouse I kind of roll in. But for me, I just kind of went the pretentious route, and whatever the Criterion Collection was putting out that was Russian, that's what I watched. So, what is it? Elim Klimov, his film Come and See. It's an 80s war epic. It's very depressing.
It really
is. And then a lot of Tarkovsky's work. So Stalker, Solaris, Mirror, things like that.
Yeah, because I think my Russian film watching sort of falls into two categories. Things like Einstein and Tarkovsky, and then genre trash like the Night Watch movies, or possibly the film that we are reviewing on this show.
Possibly. I think everybody knows what we're leaning more towards, but it's possibly is a word.
Okay, well, I think it's time to get stuck into Guardian, so let's listen to a deep-voiced man spoon-feed us the background to the story.
They were born as ordinary people. in a country that had never known superheroes. But one day, they made a choice. Or the choice was made for them. They were created and sworn to protect their country, the people who would never know they existed. And when the Soviet Union fell, they remained behind, in hiding. But now evil is rising from the shadows of the past, and they must prepare for the final battle.
The 2017 Russian superhero film Guardians is set during and after the Cold War. It follows a team of Soviet superheroes created by a secret organization called Patriot who defend the USSR from superhuman threats. During the Cold War, the Patriot organization genetically enhances individuals from various Soviet republics, forming a superhero team that is meant to reflect the cultural diversity of the USSR. We have Arsus, a man who can transform into a powerful bear man, Khan, a super speed fighter wielding curved swords, Lear, a kinetic who can control earth and stone, and Xena, a woman who can become invisible and transform into water. However, the Patriot organization quickly collapses amid rivalry and jealousy between some of the key scientists involved in the program, and that forces the Guardians into hiding. Fast forward to present day, and Professor August Kuratov, a disgraced scientist behind Patriot, resurfaces as a cyborg with the ability to control machines and electricity. He forms an army of machines and launches a plan to take over the world's technology using a Soviet satellite network. To answer this threat, the Guardians are assembled by Major Elena Larina to stop Kuratov and save the world. The film is directed by Sarek Andreasen, who has worked almost exclusively in Russia, making films and TV shows I've never heard of. However, he does have one credit on a non-Russian film, having helmed the 2014 film American Heist with Adrian Brody, Hayden Christensen, and an exploding helicopter. In the cast, we have Anton Popushny, Sanjar Mardi, Sebastian Sisak, Alina Lenina, and Valeria Shikrando. When the film was released in Russia, on Defender of the Fatherland Day, no less, it topped the Russian box office. That's not as prestigious as it may sound, as when you look at the hard numbers, the Guardians grossed a total of $10 million worldwide. The film was universally panned in the Russian media for its bad acting, poor special effects, and its curious plotting. The film has a 4.1 user rating on IMDb and a 1.9 out of 5 user rating on Letterboxd. So, with all of that out of the way, Nick, what did you make of Guardians?
This was a rough one. This was a film that put me to sleep. I rented this, the subtitled version, because I feel with foreign film, it's important to have the original dialogue, and you just suffer through some subtitles. I don't mind subtitles, some people don't, but you get a better understanding of the character. There's a better read. They might have the way they say words, you know what I mean? Like it kind of comes through like that. I fell asleep and I didn't feel like paying for the rental again, so I watched the dub version, and it took me 4 nights to watch it. I either kept falling asleep during the movie, or I was like, I can only handle 20 minutes of this. I got to go do something else. The worst part, it's not like it's 9, 10 o'clock at night and I'm watching this. It's like 4 in the afternoon. No, there's no need to take a nap. And this film is like putting me to sleep.
And it's only 90 minutes long as well.
Right? But it feels much, much longer. And it's tough to watch at times because not even from an acting standpoint, just from a visual standpoint, some of it feels like a fever dream that they were trying to capture. And other times it feels like a video game or like video game cutscenes because of how the characters either interact with each other or the setting at the time. The acting itself, I'm sure we'll touch on that, but overall, I was... This isn't even a movie that I would like sit around with some buddies and rag on. You know, everybody's got those movies where it's like, hey, let's come over, have a couple beers, watch a terrible movie. I wouldn't do that to my friends.
Well, I mean, Nick, this could be quite an interesting discussion, because very often we find ourselves kind of in agreement, often in, having similar outlooks on the film we're reviewing, but I'm much more positive about this film than you are, I think. I mean,
really?
This is a deeply flawed movie. Like, everything you say about the acting, the special effects, the storytelling is absolutely true, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. I mean, it's pacey, it's slick, it reminds me of many other often, well, almost invariably better movies, but I just found that it slipped down quite nicely and easily, and you can, like, the characterization is wafer thin. The special effects, the special effects get slammed a lot actually in reviews of this film, and I actually think they're actually pretty good. Maybe I've just, you know what, Nick, maybe I've just watched too many Asylum movies. Like, I thought the special effects in this film were absolutely fine. Like,
yeah, they were fine. No issue, nothing like out of the or nothing so run of the mill or awful to where it's like off-putting and takes you out of the film. Sure, there's a couple moments that aren't great, but overall, it's fine. I agree with you. It's fine.
But yeah, I enjoyed this film. It just is completely inoffensive, disposable, throwaway trash. I enjoyed the sort of slightly different flavor that this Russian-produced superhero movie adds to that particular genre. Although, having said that, I would have really preferred a stronger Russian flavor to this movie. I think that would have definitely elevated. I have no idea what that would ultimately have looked like, but I just think I would have enjoyed it more. But yeah, overall, I'm really surprised that you struggled with this movie as much as you did, because I mean, we've watched some pretty terrible stuff on this podcast,
yes.
Nick. And I really wasn't expecting you to. I mean, maybe it's just a cumulative thing. Maybe I've just, this is just like one fence too many for you to jump. Maybe you've hit the wall a little bit with Guardians.
Well, I think for me with Guardians, it's not fair that I'm coming into this with that, superhero movie exhaustion. I've hit my breaking point with the Marvel films. I thought Fantastic Four was awful, and I just don't care anymore. I genuinely don't care about the DC stuff coming out, and I'm a big Batman guy. So coming into this and knowing it's a superhero thing, part of me already went in with like a slight negative bias, which is unfair to the film. But I found myself more than not like writing down questions the entire time and trying to understand some of the decisions they make in this film, because, we talk about how it's not even, or roughly 90 minutes, but there's some scenes that kind of just linger. And I'm like, we could tidy this up. The opening credits are like 6 minutes long. It feels like it feels like a Bond intro. I mean, even it was comical watching the whole, how you have the studio title cards that pop up before the like actual credits. Those just kept happening, and I think, just so unawares going into this that I'm like, what am I watching right now? Because it wasn't like your usual, I feel, team-up movie, because there's already a history amongst the characters.
Yeah.
And I became more fascinated in that. I think there's a good idea here, and there's potential for a great story. I just think they went about telling it the wrong way.
Well, I mean, you've put your, a finger on something that I noticed about this film as well, which is that there are loads of problems with the storytelling in this film, because you have these characters who are created as part of some post-Second World War scientific experiment in the Soviet Union, yet they are now exist in 2017 as people who look no more than like 35 years of age, yet there's no explanation as to why they haven't aged. There's no real explanation as to where they've been during that time, why no one has found them, like why did they go into hiding? Like, all of that is just sort of airbrushed away. There's also no sense within this group that these characters actually know each other, and that this is they're coming back together having not seen each other for decades. There's no sense of this group coming back together, and it's that's just one example of many plot holes or story gaps that there are within this movie, which in some ways, look, I get very frustrated with these Marvel movies. They're like 2 hours 40, 2 hours 50, 3 hours 20, like whatever. So maybe I if I'm starting to wish for like longer films, I'm then going to start getting these god awful films that feel like they never end. So maybe I should be careful what I wish for. But it did feel like this film was so lean as to the point of actually harming its storytelling, because it was just so skimpy on the detail.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, I could have used another 15, maybe 20 minutes to kind of dig into that, because like you pointed out some great ones, like, are they immortal? And if they're a team coming back together, why do they feel like they've never spent time with each other before? There's no camaraderie. There's no spark in the relationship. There's no on-screen chemistry at all. It feels like just a bunch of renegades coming together. Now, maybe it's because they haven't seen each other in hundreds of years. I don't think that's the case, so we can knock that one out of the way. But there's just not any cohesion. I mean, they go into their first kind of mission in this bombed out factory, and spoilers, immediately they're all caught, and one of them assumedly is left for dead.
It's an absolute shambles.
Yeah, like, it's horrible. And I can understand the female character whose name I can't remember offhand, her ability to mask herself in the water and be invisible, which is hyper specific. Her having an issue that I can understand because of how they go about identifying her character with the thermals, right? But you've got this bear guy, you've got this blade dude, and you got Rocky coming out just with very specific powers too. He's just moving rocks and hanging out. Like he's like kind of the Thing, but like kind of Doctor Strange at the same time. But also, like, nobody has charisma. So it's one of those, like, are they reluctantly together and they just are because they happen to have a lot in common with the traumatic events they went through, and they're just kind of like, well, here we are? Or, like, was there a rift before? Because the female character, she doesn't even remember, like, anything. She doesn't remember the people. She tries to beat the hell out of, or technically annihilate, Blades. Yeah. And I just found myself, like, confused at times, and again, no spark even as the film went through, and there was like these weird one-off lines and jokes, and I'm like, well, that fell flat. Like, I get what they're going for, but what's the end game here? Like, what are we trying to accomplish with these characters?
Well, I watched the English dub, so I'm actually very interested in your experience of watching the original version with subtitles. And you obviously, I'm assuming you get the original voices of the actors there, because as I'm sure you know from your experience of the English dub, it's pretty awful with these bunch of like no-mark actors. It's just another day in the sound booth. And we're churning out this dialogue. I mean, there's no attempt by the actors voicing these characters to really, I feel like, lend anything. I mean, it sounds like pure soap opera. It
really does.
The dub. I mean, that is like, it's real daytime soap opera stuff. So when you sampled the subtitled version, did that heighten your like the elements of the characters, or was it just as bad in the original Russian?
No, it was an improvement. there was more of an energy and a passion to how they spoke and delivered the dialogue. With the subtitles, there were some different translations, like words here and there. Nothing crazy, but enough to like, okay, it's a softer approach or a more firm approach with certain characters. Also, the voices kind of matched better. It wasn't like you said, some kind of generic run-of-the-mill, oh, we're in a sound booth kind of thing. It made their main character, muscles and electricity. It made him a little more menacing instead of the voice that we got. And I think the voice actors in this, they're doing voice acting thing, good for them. But I feel like some of the delivery, they try to be like smarmy and cocky about things, and it just comes across as like bland and not really fitting the tone of what's going on. So this is a film that I would, if you decide to watch this, please go for the subtitled version, because I think it would improve the experience of the film overall.
Well, let's talk about in what ways Guardians borrows, or in what ways it differs from sort of Hollywood superhero movies. So, from your experience of watching this Russian effort, what's your take on the similarities, I guess, with Hollywood efforts and the differences that may exist with what you saw here?
I've seen every Marvel film from Iron Man through now with Fantastic Four, minus the Marvels. Seen them all. At no point do I remember a character being captured. Outside of Iron Man, because that's a part of his origin story, it's the very beginning of the film that he gets captured. I've never seen a hero with powers get captured. They've always got away at the last minute. They've always found a way to duck out and then kind of montage, rebuild themselves, and come out. But with this, it feels like defeat is around every single corner. I don't know why, but local networks here have been running the Harry Potter films on a loop, right? Harry Potter is borderline incompetent. He gets lucky with some spells, but he's surrounded by a team that always helps him out and helps him figure stuff out because he couldn't do it alone. Hermione and Ron and so on and so forth. With this film, it feels like these characters can't do anything, and they happen to get by through luck or like a last minute, oh, don't forget you can do this option. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they do that thing and get lucky with it. So there's no feeling of like, here comes this character or this hero. They're confident. They have control of their abilities. They know what they're doing. People recognize them. Instead, it's like, are they vigilantes? Are they what are they to Russian society? Do they know these heroes? Do they idolize them in any way? And you just don't see that. You don't see what the public thinks about them. I mean, and obviously the Marvel films later on, they explore wide swaths of that. But there's just a lot of the meat and world building that is not there, right? But it also, some scenes pull directly from Guardians of the Galaxy. The way some of the fight scenes are, it looks like any other very generic superhero fight scene. So there's elements that just look familiar. There's like one-off scenes that look like we've seen it before, like when they come across Floaty Rock's body and he's just kind of laying there. Well, it's kind of similar to Thor when he's getting in a fight with Thanos and seeing the Hulk knocked out. Like, you just see a lot of these similarities, and also it's hard not to, because you have a woman that can go invisible, Sue Storm, Fantastic Four. You've got this character manipulating the Earth, Doctor Strange, and has this rock-like ability. Ben, I don't remember the character's last name, the Thing from Fantastic Four. You got a Blades guy. All right, you can look at that as like Moon Knight, or even Blade. And then you've got this guy turning into a bear, and obviously that's the Hulk. And I get the bear, Russian. Okay, cool. But it's all of these abilities, and again, the biggest thing is there's no cohesion. With the original Avengers film, by the end of the film, they're a cohesive unit, and we see that moment when they're standing in the circle, cameras panning around, they're like, these guys are dialed in, they're getting it done. And we just don't see that with them. It's kind of like, oh, we have to do this? Okay. And then they go and do it, and there's this uncertainty about themselves. If this film was a sequel that came out, say, 8 to 10 years after the original, you might have a really solid film here because the characters are already established. We already know what's going on. and then you add another 5-10 minutes to let them know what's going on between the two films, or like you said, just anything about them in general, where they've been hiding and what they've gotten into. They could even have like 3 or 4 lines of throwaway dialogue. Before this, I was working at the circus and I hated it and I had to hide my abilities. But if like people aren't recognizing them, then do they have to hide their abilities? It's not like, hey, I'm Mikolai, but secretly I'm Arsis the bear person, right? Like you don't get that. And you get the whole, instead of Patriot, you get the SHIELD organization, so that's all kind of the same. But it just feels like, oh, let's do this, and then not really execute.
Yeah, I mean, and just to pick up on a point you were making there, I mean, like, what is the motivation? These characters have been in hiding, we assume, for decades. What's their motivation for, like, saddling back up in service of the state once again? They're just approached by that major who tells them, we've got a problem and, like, we need your help. And they're like, yeah, sure. But, like, well, they presumably... they were like abandoned. They were like, they feared for their lives. That's why they were in hiding. Like, so you would think there'd be some dilemma for those characters about having to come back into the service of a state that betrayed them, or to suddenly surface again and put their life at risk because, I don't know, the public wanted them dead for whatever reason, or they were seen as a freak or an outcast. I mean, like, those questions, those ideas, all standard stuff within these types of movies, not explored, not engaged with at all whatsoever. Yeah, some really bizarre choices. But having said that, though, there are some interesting things which are a bit different from the Hollywood movies that we've seen here. And I was like reading up on some stuff about this film, and there's an idea here that the kind of each of the characters in this movie are sort of like a representative of a different state within the USSR, and that they kind of embody the characteristics of that state. Now, like, I'm not familiar enough with the Soviet Union, with Russia, to be able to sort of identify what those are. And, despite sort of doing some various digging around, I couldn't really sort of flesh out that aspect of the film. But I was weirdly, just yesterday, there was an article I was reading online about a Ukrainian filmmaker who had worked for many years within the Russian film industry. He was decrying the state of Russian filmmaking in the last sort of 10 years. And obviously, as a Ukrainian, he's not exactly well disposed towards the Russian state at the moment. But he was basically saying that kind of Russian movie making over, in recent years is just now, it's just all propaganda and fairy tales, and that there's no social dramas, there's no one's wanting to make any films that reflect the Soviet Union as it is today. And I think it's interesting to sort of, I was thinking about that in regards to this film, because this film does seem to be in some ways a bit of a celebration of the Soviet Union. It doesn't bear any relation to the real world of Russia now, and it's not the most, it's not Red Dawn in terms of like rah kind of propaganda, but it definitely feels like it's banging the old Russian / Soviet drum.
Yeah, it's kind of an escapism mentality. You know what I mean? Instead of like watching an indie Russian film where someone's exploring the self, working at a convenience store and fighting with a girlfriend or something like that, or 2 Russian guys are on a road trip to get burgers somewhere and then they get into hijinks, and there's no like road movies or hang films like a Dazed and Confused or Everybody Wants Some. There's nothing where they're just seeing Russia like for what it is and exploring it. And like you said, to have these kind of propagandized films where it's like, look at these people with abilities, you've got abilities within you too, you just need to believe in yourself and harness them, blah blah blah. See some explosions and some fighting, take your mind off of the explosions and the fighting that's going on in the country. But yeah, and the worst part is it rings hollow and it kind of falls flat. And I think that's a disservice to the people of Russia, because I'm sure they don't want to watch, this same thing over and over, and they want to escape, like The Lord of the Rings, where you're truly going off to another world, or Star Wars, you're going out into space and exploring things. Like, I think they just need that fantasy, not necessarily fairy tales where they're retelling, folklore and old Russian stories like that, but truly like fantasy films. And they're just not getting that. And I think maybe in a weird way, this is them trying to break into that, but they don't know how. So they borrowed from what they've seen other people do, and it just didn't connect because it wasn't like their voice coming out. It wasn't what they wanted to say.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding helicopter action.
Inside this skyscraper, high above the city, John Lombardi waits for his revenge. For years, he stalked his enemy.
He built his fortune with my family's money.
At last, it's time to get even. The ex-husband of his innocent victim has joined the game.
No, she dumped you long before she married me.
And he's a die-hard cop with a dangerous attitude.
Take it easy, sweetheart. We're in for a long night.
Until we get Susan out of this, we're stuck together.
You and your friend won't get out of this building alive. I want you to kill him! I told you to come alone.
I just happen to be in the neighborhood, okay? Listen up, man. Your goons are dropping like flies.
You men were supposed to be your best!
Michael Pare, Shannon Tweed, Bobby DeCicco, and Robert Pucci fight for their lives in The Last Hour. Coming soon from Academy Entertainment.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding helicopter action. This occurs right at the beginning of the film. A Russian army weapons test goes awry when Kuratov uses his mind-over-machine powers to take control of some futuristic military robots. After destroying some tanks, one of the robots fires a rocket at a helicopter that's come on the scene, causing it to explode. Nick, what did you make of the exploding helicopter action?
This comes in 5.5 minutes into the movie, and I thought, man, this is going to be great. Here we go. What's interesting about this exploding helicopter is kind of how it explodes and how we experience the explosion, right? So you got this, I mean, they look like the droidicas from Star Wars Phantom Menace, right? They're rolling around shooting missiles. And here comes this helicopter. It's been hit. It's on fire. It's spinning right at the camera. And they use that as an edit point to go to a different scene. Like almost like you've come out of the flames and you're onto a different part of the film. And I kind of thought that was neat. I thought it was different. I don't think I've ever seen a helicopter used as an edit like that where the flame's coming at you. And should it have been longer? Yes. Could it have been a little bit better? Sure, but I'm not exactly certain how. And, I am disappointed that we don't get to see that wreckage in the distance because the flame could have easily come towards us and then we cut to a different moment where, tanks are blowing up or what have you, and then we see the helicopter fall down and explode. Kind of give us a 1-2 punch. But overall, I thought it was just that little twist was kind of inventive and neat.
Well, I think you're a bit warmer on this scene than I am because I felt myself being quite frustrated by this particular scene. We've got this sequence with these robots taking on all comers. They blow up a whole series of tanks and everything, and it really feels like it's going to be the start of something much bigger. And we see a number of helicopters hove into view here, and I thought we were going to get to see 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 helicopters sort of be blown out of the sky here. But
yeah,
as you were describing, we get to see this one explode, and it's only pretty briefly, and then cut, we're out of the scene whatsoever. And I found myself being a bit frustrated because I just saw the what if or what could have been possibilities of this particular scene open up before me, and then they were snatched away by the movie maker. So I was somewhat frustrated by that. element of it. A little bit of compensation for me was the fact that I got to see one of my favorite helicopters, the Mill Mi-24 Hind helicopter, being blown up here. It's one of those classic helicopters, and obviously a Russian helicopter at that as well. So that was a small bit of compensation, but yeah, overall I was somewhat disappointed by this scene. Too brief, and it felt like it blew the potential for the sort of the sequence seemed to have set itself up for.
Yeah, absolutely. And also part of me thinks, the more I look at this scene and think about it, you're just going to send one helicopter for all these robots? You couldn't have had a couple others with helicopters running into helicopters or just something. But, at least they were a touch creative with it. And I'd rather see that than to just see it like explode and then that's it. You know what I mean? Because I like the explosion, don't get me wrong, but there's also the after that I like too. Is it falling and hitting a building? Is it landing in a field during a fight and now they use that as a shelter? Or, what can you do with it after is always a fun thing to explore for me. And sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But in this case, I think it's, like I said, that middle of the road. It's just a little creative on how they presented it. But I do agree with you that it's frustrating that we don't get more.
Okay, I think that just about wraps things up for this show. Nick, thanks for joining me once again. Before we say Dos Vidania, is there anything you've got going on at the moment that you want to plug?
You can just head over to rabbitholepodcasts.com. Of course, I'm on the show Play MST for me, as well as Lyrical Innuendo. And we're doing it. We're having some fun, so go check it out.
As always, don't forget to check out the Exploding Helicopter website for more reviews and information about films where helicopters explode. If you can help spread the word about what we do by giving us a plug on social media or leaving a review, we'd be very grateful. We'll be back soon. But until then, what should people do, Nick?
Смотри, как разбивается вертолет. This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Let me get this straight. I have 2 weeks to search the entire Soviet world to assemble a team of superhumans. A team to stop a supervillain.
That is the mission. This team you must assemble is our only hope. Questions?
No, sir, I have no more questions. I should return to work. May I go now, sir?
Yes, dismissed.